economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In the state of Palestine, the death toll from the Israeli barbaric aggression against Gaza and the occupied West Bank has risen to over 3,600. Here in Algeria, thousands of protesters took to the street in massive demonstrations to express their solidarity with the people of Gaza. The United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution that would have called for humanitarian pauses to deliver life-saving aid to millions in Gaza. And 20 trucks of humanitarian aid will head to the besieged Gaza Strip as the humanitarian situation is reported to be disastrous there. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Semeni. The Palestinian Health Ministry announced today that the death toll from the Zionist aggression against Gaza and the occupied West Bank has risen to 3,569 martyrs and more than 13,200 wounded. The ministry said in a statement that 3,500 people had fallen in the Gaza Strip since the start of the aggression on the 7th of October, while the number of people in the West Bank governorates has risen to 69. He added that more than 12,000 citizens had been injured since the beginning of the aggression in the Gaza Strip, while in the West Bank the number of injured reached around 1,200. As you followed in our top stories, the United States Wednesday has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution that would have called for humanitarian pauses to deliver life-saving aid to millions in Gaza. The failure by the Council to make its first public intervention on the Israel-Gaza crisis followed the rejection of a Russian-backed draft on Monday evening. Why 12 of the Council's 15 members voted in favor of the Brazilian-led text. 1. The United States voted against, and 2. Russia and the United Kingdom abstained. U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield explained her country's veto in the Council chamber, saying this.
A political disaster is underway, and yet the Security Council of the United Nations is unable to say the only thing that truly matters. Stop the bloodshed. I repeat, stop the bloodshed. For those who think they can avert a humanitarian catastrophe and a regional spillover while Israel continues bombing and killing Palestinians, think again.
Well, that was the Palestinian ambassador to the UN who slammed the UN Security Council for failing to protect the Palestinian civilians. Now let's go back to the US Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, who explained her country's veto in the Council chamber of the resolution.
Resolutions are important, and yes, this Council must speak out, but the actions we take must be informed by the facts on the ground and support direct diplomacy efforts that can save lives. The Council needs to get this right. The United States is disappointed this resolution made no mention of Israel's rights of self-defense. The United States is horrified and saddened by yesterday's explosion at the Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza. We mourn this tragic loss of life. On the humanitarian front, we are working with Israel, its neighbors, the United Nations, and other partners to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It is critical that food, medicine, water, and fuel begin flowing into Gaza as soon as possible. Families, the elderly, and children are in dire need.
A no vote from any one of the 5 permanent members of the Council stops action on any measure put before it. The body's permanent members are China, France, Russia, Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States. In a reaction, Hamas member Mohammed Nazel said the U.S. rejects the idea of a ceasefire.
Actually, we think there is a conspiracy from America and European countries on our issue. They don't want to make any ceasefire to stop aggression on our people and on Gaza Strip. So this shows that America and European countries are biased to Israeli government.
Meanwhile, Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar bin Jammeh, has reaffirmed Algeria's firm condemnation of the Zionist aggression against the Palestinian people and urged the United Nations Security Council to put an immediate end to the ongoing tragedy in Gaza. In a speech to the Security Council at an emergency meeting on the situation in Palestine, Ammar bin Jammeh strongly reiterated Algeria's unchanging position in favor of the Palestinian question. He began by reiterating Algeria's warning, which it has been issuing for years against the deterioration of the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, underlining that the new cycle of violence is the result of the absence of a political solution to the Palestinian question and the disastrous conditions in which generations of Palestinians are forced to live. Straightforwardly, Ammar bin Jammeh urged the Security Council to put an immediate end to the tragedy in Gaza, where for 10 days the civilian population has been deprived of food, shelter and water and has been subjected to airstrikes by the Israeli occupying forces. While noting that the war was not against the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas, but a war against all Palestinians, the diplomat said that Algeria strongly condemns deliberate attacks on civilians in the Gaza Strip by the occupying forces. Now, the United Nations organization has said that an unprecedented catastrophe is unfolding for civilians in Gaza, pleading for Islamic leaders to allow humanitarian efforts into the territory to help those trapped there. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East released a statement Wednesday urging the Council of Foreign Ministers of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to firmly and unconditionally support the humanitarian efforts to safeguard civilians in Gaza. More in this report by Said Bougazi.
UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini evoked the harrowing images from the El Ahli hospital in Gaza, where nearly 500 people were killed in a blast on Tuesday night, to highlight the plight of the civilians who remain in Gaza. Another airstrike struck an UNRWA school sheltering 4,000 displaced people on Tuesday, killing at least 6 people, Lazzarini said. Palestinian political analyst Mkhimer Abu Saada had this to say.
2 hospitals have run out of service so far in the north of Gaza because of Israeli bombardment, also because of Israeli decision or orders to evacuate the areas where these hospitals, a hospital in the Beit Hanun area was shut off, and also another hospital in the Jabalia refugee camp was ordered by the Israelis. And the hospitals that are still running, some of these hospitals have faced bombing in the nearby areas. It's extremely difficult situation that already the Palestinian health system in Gaza is suffering from the 16 years of Israeli siege and blockade. And with the number of deaths and number of wounded Palestinians, the health infrastructure cannot absorb and deal with all of these number of injured Palestinians. And it's a situation that even the World Health Organization said that there is a collapse on the part of the health system here in Gaza, because also of the tight closure and tight siege that have been imposed on Gaza with no electricity, no fuel, no medical supplies. It's a very appalling situation here in the Gaza.
An unprecedented catastrophe is unfolding before our eyes, Lazzarini said. Gaza is being strangled and the world seems to have lost its humanity. A humanitarian crisis began in Gaza almost as soon as the retaliatory airstrikes from Israel began last week following the October 7th attack on Israel by the Gaza-based Palestinian resistance factions. The territory is highly dependent on imports, and with the crossings into Israel and Egypt currently sealed, supplies are running out fast. Just 1 week after the latest fighting between Israel and Hamas began, 1 million people inside Gaza were forced to flee their homes, according to Lazzarini. 14 frontline humanitarian workers from the UNRWA are among the dead in Gaza, Lazzarini noted, adding that since the fighting began, not one shipment of aid has been allowed into Gaza. A surgical team and 60 tons of humanitarian aid and medical items have been mobilized to the Rafah border crossing from Egypt into southern Gaza, the International Committee of the Red Cross announced on Tuesday. But the aid was not granted passage on Monday when the crossing was supposed to be opened. With about 2.4 million people packed in just 140 square miles, residents living in the Gaza Strip, wedged between Israel, Egypt, and the Mediterranean Sea, were experiencing threats to their food and water supply even before Hamas's surprise attack on Israel led to war.
On the matter, we contacted a member of the resistance movement of Hamas, Mohammed Nazel, who also spoke to Radio Algeria International about the humanitarian situation on the ground.
Actually, the situation now is very bad. That Israeli army is killing thousands of our people. They are kids, women, elders. They destroyed hospitals, schools, mosques, all civilians' buildings. They are destroying it. So actually, the situation shows that Israeli troops should stop the aggression on Gaza. This is what we call the international community to do it.
Still with the humanitarian side, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has agreed to allow up to 20 trucks of humanitarian aid into the besieged Gaza Strip, U.S. President Joe Biden said Wednesday. Addressing reporters on Air Force One, Biden said he was very blunt about the need to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. Gaza is already experiencing a dire humanitarian crisis with no electricity, while water, food, fuel, and medical supplies are running out. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. This is the English service. Still with our special edition today on what is happening and the situation in Gaza. The Organization of the Islamic Cooperation has reiterated its firm condemnation of the ongoing aggression against the Gaza Strip and vigorously denounced the blatant targeting by the occupying forces of Al Ahli Arabi Al Mamadani Hospital, the latest provisional death toll of which is at least 500 people and hundreds of Palestinians injured. Said Bougazi has more.
The OIC reiterates its strong condemnation of the unprecedented attack on civilians in the besieged Gaza Strip and throughout the occupied Palestinian territories, including murder, bombardment, deliberate destruction of infrastructure, threats to commit atrocities against civilians, genocide, and forced displacement, it said in a statement issued after an extraordinary meeting of its foreign ministers in Saudi Arabia. The OIC called notably for the immediate cessation of the unbridled aggression of the Zionist occupying forces against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the immediate lifting of the blockade imposed there, and confirms its total rejection of the targeting of civilians on any pretext whatsoever, or their expulsion from their homes, or even starving them, making them thirsty and depriving them of safe access to humanitarian aid. It urged all countries to expedite the provision of humanitarian, medical and relief assistance, the supply of water and electricity, and the immediate opening of humanitarian corridors for the safe delivery of emergency aid to the Gaza Strip, notably through UN agencies including UNRWA, as well as support for its related efforts. The organization also strongly denounced the blatant targeting by the brutal Zionist occupying forces of the El Ma'amdani civil hospital in the Gaza Strip, which resulted in the death and injury of hundreds of sick, wounded and displaced innocent civilians, which constitutes a war crime and genocide, as well as a blatant violation of international humanitarian law, ethics and international and humanitarian charters. In this respect, it urged the international community to act swiftly and hold the Zionist occupation to account for committing these heinous war crimes against the Palestinian people and all humanity, while demanding immediate intervention to stop this massacre. Blaming the Zionist entity for the plight of civilians in the Gaza Strip, the OIC stressed the imperative of sparing the lives of all civilians and not targeting them in any way, in accordance with international law, international humanitarian law, and divine precepts, and rejected categorically calls for the displacement of the inhabitants of Gaza.
Here in Algeria, huge popular demonstrations began simultaneously across the country on Thursday, called by political parties and civil society organizations in support of and in solidarity with the Palestinian people in their resistance to the barbaric Israeli aggression. These demonstrations come in the wake of the genocide and war of extermination perpetrated by the Zionist entity, but also in consolidation of Algeria's positions on the Palestinian cause. Several political parties and civil society organizations, signatories of the Appeal for the Defense of Palestine, had called last Tuesday the Algerian people to demonstrate across the country in support of and in solidarity with the Palestinian people, victims of barbaric massacres perpetrated by the iniquitous Zionist entity. Meanwhile, the Minister of Communication, Mohamed Lagab, has received the ambassador of the State of Palestine to Algiers, Faiz Mahmoud Abu Aita, who praised the efforts of the Algerian media in showing the true image and heinous face of the Zionist entity, willfully concealed by their Western counterparts. During this meeting, which coincided with the tragic events in the occupied Palestinian territories following the barbaric Zionist aggression against the Gaza Strip and several other regions under occupation, such as Jenin, Mr. Abu Aita said that the aim of the meeting was to convey our thanks and gratitude to all the Algerian media for their invaluable information services in support of the Palestinian cause. Speaking about the media, for decades, Palestinians and their supporters have claimed that Western mainstream media are considerably biased in favor of Israel, Hamas' operation on Israel, and the brutal Israeli military assault on Gaza has revived this debate. The Israeli occupation authorities desperately have tried to spread misinformation and mislead the public opinion through the voices of the media they control. From the besieged Gaza Strip, political analyst Mkhimar Abu Sada commented the issue.
It's a war of narrative between Hamas and the Israelis. The Israelis from the beginning were fabricating some images by Netanyahu and his government to claim that Hamas beheaded babies and children and attacked Israeli civilians intentionally. And as a result of that, Hamas came out with some videos which have been taken by cameras along the border between Gaza and Israel, and also have been taken by these Hamas resistance fighters to basically refute the narrative of the Israeli government, the narrative of the Israeli army, and the narrative of the Israeli media.
We contacted a member of the Hamas, Mohammed Nazel, who spoke about how Hamas assured this time how to convey the message to the media in order to counter Israel's fake news.
Actually, we are calling all medias in West countries, in Arab countries, in African countries, in Asia countries. We are talking with them. We are explaining our stand, and we are making contacts with many countries in diplomacy field to explain what we are facing in Gaza Strip. We are facing great actions and great aggression on our people.
Here in Algiers, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has asked all its embassies and diplomatic missions abroad to cancel all preparations related to the festivities commemorating the anniversary of the glorious first November Revolution in solidarity with Palestine on the instructions of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. The Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Brahim Boughali, has expressed from Baghdad, Algeria's inalienable position with regard to the Palestinian cause, stating that the escalation in the region is due to the Zionist occupation of the Palestinian territories, according to a press release issued by the lower house of parliament. Speaking at the extraordinary session of the 35th Conference of the Arab Interparliamentary Union, Brahim Boughali stressed the need for the participants to condemn the dangerous violations suffered by the Palestinian people at the hands of the Zionist occupier, pointing out that Algeria has constantly underlined that the escalation in the region is due to the Zionist occupation. Brahim Boughali called on the Arab states to adopt a clear and courageous stance to express their solidarity with the Palestinian brothers, given that the international community is turning a deaf ear to the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, notably to the establishment of an independent state with Jerusalem as its capital, and continues to adopt double standards in the implementation of Security Council resolutions when it comes to war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the Israeli occupier. Now, several political parties, associations, and national organizations have reaffirmed their condemnation of the heinous crimes committed against the Palestinian people by the apartheid Israel, calling for the perpetrators of these crimes to be brought before the International Criminal Court. The details with Said Bouazi.
The Ennahda movement affirmed its constant position of support for the Palestinian people, denouncing the brutal aggression perpetrated on the El Ma'amdani hospital in Gaza, which resulted in the martyrdom of hundreds of defenseless civilians. For its part, the General Union of Algerian Workers, UGTA, reiterated its categorical rejection of the genocide committed against the defenseless Palestinian people, calling on all trade union leaders and workers to go out on Thursday in Algiers as part of the Solidarity March. The National Organization of Mujahideen, for its part, stressed the need to act to adopt a firm and unified position, forcing the Zionist enemy to stop its aggression, which has reached an unprecedented degree of barbarity. The same position was taken by the National Union of Magistrates, which called on all human rights organizations to launch legal proceedings against the leaders of the Zionist entity. For its part, the Algerian Consumers Federation FAC called for the intensification of consultation between Arab Muslim countries to demand an immediate halt to the despicable aggression, the opening of humanitarian corridors to deliver aid to the Gaza Strip, and the organization of an international conference to collect donations and aid from friendly countries. In the same vein, the General Union of Algerian Traders and Craftsmen, UGCAA, called for participation in the Solidarity March scheduled for today, Thursday, to support the Palestinian people in their struggle and resistance. As for the General Secretariat of the Consultative Council of the Arab Maghreb Union, it called on the international community to intervene to put an end to the horrific crimes and acts of ethnic extermination perpetrated by the arrogant Zionist entity against the Palestinian people, inviting the Arab Muslim nation to strengthen and coordinate its positions, but also to intensify its efforts to support the resistance of the Palestinian people. At the end of a meeting attended by 13 political parties, the participants issued a communiqué in which they considered it imperative to form a human rights commission to authenticate the war crimes committed by the Zionist occupier against the Palestinian people and to launch criminal proceedings before the ICC to condemn the occupier. The signatory parties of the communiqué also reiterated their absolute support by all means for the brave Palestinian resistance, the criminalization of normalization with the Zionist entity, and the rejection of all forms of forced displacement of Palestinians. An urgent appeal was also made for the establishment of an air bridge to help our brothers in besieged Gaza and the immediate opening of the Rafah crossing to receive official and popular aid, according to the statement.
Here in Algiers, the Ministry of Communication announced the postponement of the celebration of National Press Day and the ceremony to award the President of the Republic's Prize for Professional of the President for Professional Journalists due to the dangerous and tragic situation in occupied Palestine. The communiqué reads, the Ministry of Communication announces the postponement of the celebration of National Press Day and the awards ceremony for the President of the Republic's Prize for President of the Prize for Professional Journalism, scheduled for 21 and 22 October 2023. For her part, the Minister of Culture and Arts, Soraya Moulouj, has decided to postpone the 4th edition of the Annaba Festival, scheduled for the 3rd and 9th of November, in solidarity with the Palestinian people, according to a press release issued by the ministry. And now here is a reminder of our top stories. In the state of Palestine, the death toll from the Israeli barbaric aggression against Gaza and the occupied West Bank has risen to over 3,600. Here in Algeria, thousands of protesters took to the street in massive demonstrations to express their solidarity with the people of Gaza. The United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution that would have called for humanitarian pauses to deliver life-saving aid to millions in Gaza. And 20 trucks of humanitarian aid will head to the besieged Gaza Strip as the humanitarian situation is reported to be disastrous there. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Thank you so much for joining us all for this special edition on the situation prevailing in the Gaza